Okay,
Happy
there we
New
go.
Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year. Welcome, everyone, to the first Masterclass of 2023. We actually did this webinar in December, and it was a well-attended webinar, excellent content, and something failed and it did not record. So we thought it would be a great way to start off the new year. So here we are. This is our masterclass and an inside look into drafting. Our special, very, very special guest today is Marius. He is our very first OG original drafter, has grown the team from one to many different teams, different time zone shifts to ensure that we're constantly faster and getting you your iGuides out. Created a lot of the training materials, if not all of them, and drafting standards and all of the things. So thank you for joining us today, Marius. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing as good as can be.
As good as can be, yeah.
As good as can be expected on a Thursday. That's fair.
So we'll start off with something that's pretty basic to us because it's an integral part of what the iGuide is, which is the floor plan. But the floor plan doesn't exist without drafting and the drafting team right now. So I'd love for you to start us off by telling us, before I get into the first question, we have a set of questions that we're going to go through with Marius to kind of walk us through some frequently asked questions and to give you an inside look into drafting. When we're done with our spiels, we'll answer questions that you have. Chris or I may jump in and type answers as we go, or we'll jump in if it's something that's super related, but we will answer your question by the end of the class if we haven't during the class. And then we'll definitely be wrapped up on or before 3:00. So Marius, tell us, how does drafting work? What is the LiDAR data? What is the point cloud? What is drafting?
Okay, so drafting consists of taking all the data submitted by a photographer, and it'll be the same data that you submit in Stitch that we'll use in our drafting software, which contains the image for your panorama, the laser data reading of the room boundary for your panorama, and everything is going to be overlaid from a top-down perspective, like in Stitch, if I'm not mistaken, Chris, when you piece it all together to align it for us and then submit it online. Our drafting team will then take it from the queue, assign themselves to it, start drafting away at your property. Then we'll have it QA checked and sent out as a completed iGuide.
Done. And voila, iGuide exists.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. So how important is the visual data when you guys are drafting?
Okay. Visual data is critical. I know a lot of times in the past, we've had sometimes a operator turn off the visuals for a scan in a room. And while the point cloud laser data looks great, and we can say, okay, maybe it can be aligned, a lot of things in the room, if we don't see what the laser data is actually hitting, we can't conclude whether we draw a wall there or not, whether a window goes there or not. So if you were to walk into a bedroom and let's say it was cluttered because they were moving some stuff around the house, and the person goes, hey, I don't want you to take a scan here. You can tell them, okay, I'm going to take a scan. The visuals will not be turned on. However, they will not be turned on in the iGuide final product. For us to be able to draft that room, they do need to be able to see what is in that room that the laser data is hitting. Example, if they stacked boxes into a corner, we wouldn't know whether it's a closet, a void space, or what is happening in that room with the laser data. That's why it's that's why it's very important for a photographer to take a scan that is both visual and laser data activated in all of the spaces in the home that they would like to have drafted accurately.
Yeah, this is part of our secret sauce, is the fact that we have people looking at the data, double checking it, and we can make interpretations based on being able to see things. Or if there's, like, you can kind of see a part of a window behind a dresser, for example. If the laser isn't catching that window because it's hitting the dresser, without those visuals, you're not going to get that window. But because we have our amazing drafting team looking at your stuff, you're going to get much more accurate representation of the space. So speaking of visuals, what is the big deal with the closets? Because we get this question all the time. How do I handle the closets? What if it's full? What do I do? How many scans do I take? Do I take a scan, partial or not?
Are they important?
Do they matter?
No. Do you have to shoot closets? Really?
What's
The
the big
answer
deal?
is yes. Every space matters if you want your high guide to be drafted, including that space, and to make sure that that space is accurate. So what's going to happen is same situation as you just asked me a moment ago. Are visuals important? Yes. Number one, we have to see what's inside of the closet that the laser data is collecting. The only way that a closet can be omitted is if it's smack dab in the middle of a home and you capture all of the bounding walls from outside of it, meaning that it's in the middle of a hallway and 2 bedrooms, and you capture all sides of the closet. Then we can say, yes, we know exactly where all the walls are from the outside. That one, we can say, okay, with certainty, yes, we're going to put a regular thickness wall all the way around it, bound it by 4 sides, call it a closet. If there is a closet that's a walk-in closet in a master bedroom, for example, and you don't go in, we don't know what size that closet is going to be. And many people will tell us, oh, well, it's just this wall and this wall, it should connect. We can't go off of should if we want to be accurate and make sure that we give you a result that you can stand behind. Same thing also goes with a room. You were mentioning boxes, Kelly, and a window. It just caught my attention when you mentioned that. If there are boxes or things that are blocking doors or windows that you know are inside of a room. So say you go to a laundry room or a, what do you call it, mud room. And these people are in the process of moving and they've shoved everything into that room. But that laundry room or mudroom has a window in it or an exit outside to either the garage or to a backyard, and the boxes are completely blocking that room. We will have no idea. You may take a scan, and the scan can capture a little bit of the walls, and we can then extrapolate all the information and say, okay, walls go on the top, on the side, all the way around, and we can box out that room for you. But visuals are also really, really important so that we can see if there is an element being hidden behind an object.
Yes. And another really cool thing is that the drafting team does look for heat sources. Speaking of mudrooms and sunrooms, we try to do our best to determine if a space should or shouldn't be included in square footage based on it having a heat source, for example. So again, we're interpreting information, not just drawing lines. It's a lot more involved than you might think just superficially.
This is where we rely on the operator or photographer when they go into the home. And once again, if the room is cluttered, say it is a closet or anything, feel free to simply ask the client, or if yourself, if you're allowed to, separate some of the clothes so we can get a back wall reading.
Right, yes.
Or if you need to move a box to be able to show that there is a heat source there, that is also really good hints to our drafting team to include or exclude a space. We can also go by your comments. This is a really good feature where if you know you can't move some sort of super heavy object or big boxes that are all stacked on top of each other, and we can't see a heat source in something that you call a mudroom or something that is a sunroom, but you know yourself it is heated because the directive came from the homeowner, you can leave a note saying, hey, in this sunroom, it may not look heated, but there is a heat source in this corner, or there is a fireplace that is the heat source, etc. That way we will know to draft it out correctly and to include it for you.
So speaking of notes, that leads us into one of the other topics of conversation during this masterclass is what are the notes used for, and how do you ensure you properly get the right information to the drafting team?
So as an operator, there's 2 different ways that you can leave notes. The first one is in the comments section. That will automatically pop up once the drafter opens up your file, and the more detail you can leave and be more specific, the better. You can tell them on panorama 001, that is the kitchen, there is the following that I would like to point out. And then there you can also make requests saying, hey, this room here, it's a kitchen and dining together. I would like both of them incorporated and call the whole space kitchen. If there's a small part in the kitchen that is like a little eat-in area and you want to call it a breakfast nook, you can tell us, hey, I would like to have a small section where there is a little bar or a little seated area called a breakfast nook, and then our drafters will then be able to accommodate those requests within reason.
Yes.
Another way that you can leave those comments, if you are really wanting to make sure that that's the area, that exactly that location you want it called a certain thing, or you want us to be aware of something there, you can leave a note directly on the actual location in
Mhm.
the panorama. I don't know what to call it in Stitch, the panorama window, or we call it the drafting window. So
Mhm.
that little background where you see all your panoramas, you can leave a little note exactly where something belongs or something that you want us to watch out for.
Yeah. Another thing that I've seen come up with regards to the room labels, which is a super common one to leave notes about, is don't assume necessarily that the drafters are going to be able to interpret your note correctly by just putting a floor label on there. For example, if you have a basement that you decide you want to call rec room and it has a bar, if you do want the bar included, you can note that the bar should be included. If you don't want the bar included as a separate label or room dimension in terms of the list of rooms that show up in the detailed section, if you just write rec room, it doesn't necessarily mean you don't also want the bar. So having a note on the actual floor plan in Stitch and also in the comments section to elaborate means you're more likely to get your custom request acknowledged and understood, really, because again, it's still people interpreting information, which means the person who's receiving the note might not be able to know exactly what you're talking about. So it's just always a good idea to use as many of the tools as we have available to try and get your point across. So that's using both of the ways to comment in Stitch is always preferred to ensure that it's very clear for everyone involved.
Yep. And that being said, you don't need to leave a huge essay.
No.
But if you want to put in 2 sentences to make sure that we fully understand what you are envisioning for the drafted space, for example, like Kelly said, in the basement, where you may want to call it rec room, family room, bonus room, and then you want to segment it out where there is no clear divider. So for example, if there is no difference in floor, like carpeting to tile or anything like that, that our team can really distinctly say, okay, this is definitely going to be 2 different spaces.
Yeah.
Rec room pertains to this panorama that is on the left side, and on the right side, they did not name it, but I can see it looks like a bar. Then we would name it that way. If everything was all carpeted, the bar section was very small, and you'd labeled a scan there rec room, it could be interpreted that the entire space will be called a rec room. Now, mind you, if that does happen, not a problem, and you want to go to your client says, hey, I need this separated, it's pretty easy to get in touch with support, open up a quick ticket, and it can be updated. But we want to make sure we get it right for you from the get-go.
Yeah, exactly. That's our goal, right? We want to be able to fulfill as many custom requested notes as possible. But we're going to do the best we can. One of my other comments to include in the masterclass is to go over, how do we get a hold of the drafting team? How does the drafting team get a hold of us? How does that communication happen between customer and drafter? What does that look like, Marius?
That is going to be our support team, where you will go to the portal and open up a ticket. There is no 911 hotline that will put you directly through to a drafter, unfortunately. But we are
Yes.
We are very, very good at accommodating your tickets in a timely manner. And the support team is really, really good at making sure that whatever your request is, if it wasn't clearly understood, for example, by a drafter, they'll make sure that when they send the information for the update, everything should be clear so that we get you back everything right away, the way that you had envisioned it to be spaced out or laid out, or the correction to be made.
Yeah, our support team is really the best entryway into Planitar, no matter what your question is, but specifically with regards to drafting, the support team has direct connections with our team leads, our QA drafters getting a fix changed, modified, something immediately actioned. So even though you don't have a direct phone number to call somebody, to get to the drafting team, the support tickets are, especially errors are one of our highest priority type tickets. So they're dealt with as soon as possible. So you will get a response very quickly after submitting a support ticket. So another frequent thing that comes up with regards to drafting is, what is data alignment? What does it mean? Why does it matter?
Okay, data alignment is in particular one of the most tricky things to do if you haven't set foot in a home.
Okay.
So for data alignment, that is why we encourage the photographer, and correct me if I'm mistaken, Chris, but you can align the property as you go through shooting with the camera to make sure that you're not going to go home later and then have to try and play a puzzle game to try and fit together all the panels that you took in the home. So if the home was, a condo, I can understand that you're going to go home, you're going to have about 10 to 15 images that you're going to put together. That's doable. The moment you step into the realm of, 10 panels per floor or more, and you're in a 3-floor home, if you step into a home that's bigger and it's like 6,000 square feet, where you're going to have about maybe 60 panels, and if that number scares anybody, I'm just going to tell you, the more data you can provide the drafting team, the better it will turn out for not having to go back to the home.
For sure.
So the alignment is crucial because as a photographer, you've been into the home, and we as drafters, we're trying to get you the data as fast as possible back to you, wanting you to not have to go back and collect any additional data. So if you align it for us, and you'll notice right away going through the home that you've missed a space or an area of the home, that's really easy for you to correct. What's harder is if you go home, do the alignment. And by the way, as you mentioned, alignment is very, very crucial for us in order to see how everything is placed properly, and we can identify our way through the home from room to room so we can draft it accurately for you. But as I was saying, you go home, you figure out you missed a space because you didn't align it at the property. It's going to be more work for you on your end to go back, get into the home again, tell them why, and then come back and deliver it back to us. Maybe it won't happen same day, depending on the availability of the client, and then it further delays everything maybe by a day.
So why is it that the drafting team doesn't align? I know you kind of touched on this, but just so everybody's crystal clear, why doesn't the drafting team align data for customers?
In order to speed up the whole process and not have to play like a puzzle game where we have to figure out where everything will go, it is really crucial that you have to align the data for us because we have not stepped foot into the property. We're unfamiliar with this, and we see hundreds of properties each day. So to expect a drafter to take additional minutes and minutes and minutes, it will add up from property to property if it's not correctly aligned. Now, I can understand maybe sometimes a mistake will happen, but with the newer camera software, if I'm not mistaken, Chris, once again, you can map out the entire floor of the home and have your scans kind of pop into the corresponding locations pretty like instantaneously once you take the scan.
Yeah, pretty much. So auto alignment is meant to combat this in the camera. It's meant to make it as easy as possible for you. So as a photographer, your primary goal when you're on site is coverage. So data alignment is part of that, which I'll get to in a second. But you want to figure out whether you've got everything, before you leave, because it's very embarrassing to find out that you don't have everything when you're at home.
Yes.
So, if you're aligning your data as you go, which would be the ideal, then you're seeing exactly what you're creating. And it's very similar to what the actual iGuide will look like. So what that means is when you look at the data, you could probably kind of, guess at what the iGuide would look like, because each dot, each scan is going to represent a point of view on the iGuide that you can click on. So if you're aligning it, you're going to see that outline, and it's going to be obviously made of like raw camera data. So it's not just like the iGuide, but you get like a rough idea. Okay, I got all the rooms. This is what it's going to look like. Cool. We're good to go. I can go home. So if you don't do that, maybe you're in a hurry. maybe you something gets messed up and you get flustered. Not a big deal. You can always do it later, obviously in Stitch. I think everybody knows that. But the ideal is to do it on site because then you can be really confident. Okay, I got it.
Exactly.
I go home. I didn't accidentally miss some huge section of the house. I think
Yeah.
most misalignment issues occur when the auto alignment fails for some reason, because it can. If there's not enough data in common, or you jump from one area of the home to other, it's quite distant. Sometimes it can get confused, or there's mirrors or whatever. I think that sometimes people get a little flustered and they just say, okay, I'll deal with it later. And that's perfectly acceptable. But the ideal is to have it all sorted before you leave, because it's you're there physically in the property. So if you need to check something, you can, and then you know what you've got before you go home.
Yes. So top two reasons why auto alignment tool fails. Number one, you don't have line of sight. And line of sight literally means if I have stood where I've placed the camera and I move the camera to another location, can I physically see where the previous camera location was? And if you can't, you don't have line of sight. And that means the data can't auto align because it doesn't know how to relate to previous data captured. So that's one of the major reasons. And then the other major reason is, something super tricky, like an entirely mirrored room sometimes can mess it all up. Or if you're doing an office scan and all of the cubicles look the same, or the rooms are exactly the same size and they look the same, the paint's the same. Sometimes if it's an entirely vacant location, it doesn't know how to identify. But most of the time it works, and most of the time it works especially with the line of sight. We actually have a training video specifically created for this purpose. I think we released it fall of last year. I can't remember when in the fall, but it was in the fall. It is on our website on the training section. And it is a super, super great tool to give you some visuals and some explanations as to what line of sight is if you're not sure. But that is one of the major reasons why auto align doesn't work, is if you don't have line of sight. So some great tips there.
Speaking about line of sight,
yeah,
from camera point to camera point or pano point to pano point, another really important thing is to make sure that we have line of sight of connecting areas for stairs between floors, because sometimes you may take a scan inside the middle of a living room, but for some reason we have no idea where the stairs are. In the end, the drafters are pretty good. They've gone through thousands of homes already, and they can kind of make an educated guess. But it's really important that we capture connecting points, not only for the sake of mapping out your own floor that you're on right now, but also of how you get in between the floors. This being said, for example, if there is a door to the stairs up or stairs down in a home, make sure that if the client wants a view with the door closed, great, that's not a problem. You can take one scan in that location with the view of the door being closed and another scan with the view of the door being open, to be as helpful as possible to the drafting team so we can identify which door leads to the stairs up, stairs down, and which one may be a closet beside the door.
Okay. So while we're talking about line of sight, there is a question in here that's from Ted Stevenson. I'm not exactly sure what you mean, but it says, what do you suggest if line of sight is not an option, such as going into a room? Then when you leave the room, the last panel will not be an option unless you take another panel on the way out and then delete it in Stitch. So I think what you're referring to is if you're in, I'll say a home. So you don't need to have line of sight in necessarily a corresponding order. So it's like pano 1 has to see pano 2, pano 2 has to see pano 1 and 3. If you've taken a scan at pano 1, which is in a hallway, and you take pano 2 inside the bedroom, you don't have to take another one in the hallway after the bedroom, as long as you take one so that you can see. There has to be line of sight between scans. So as long as between pano 2 and 1, there's a scan, and between 1 and 3, there's a scan, that constitute as line of sight. 2 and 3 don't necessarily need to be able to see each other, but they have to be able to see a pano.
I'm
Does
gonna
that make
add to
sense?
that. Is that
Yes,
okay?
please.
Okay. So when you become like a hot shot, eye guide photographer, capture specialist, whatever the cool term is, you
Yeah.
don't need line of sight, but there's consequences to not having line of sight. So let's suppose you go to a house, right? And the door has a self closer on the garage. So
Okay.
unless you happen to have something to prop it open with, as soon as you walk through that door, it's going to close. And they mostly do it for regulations or whatever. So you shoot in the hallway, you open the door, you walk into the garage, the door shuts, and you think, okay. So what's going to happen is that there's no data in common from one scan to the next. The auto alignment's going to not be happy. So that means you're going to have to manually align that. So that's consequence number one.
Yeah.
Consequence number two is that if someone navigates to the panorama and looks over, they're going to have to visually jump through a door to get to that next scan, which isn't really a big deal, but some people find it a bit like unpleasant visually, like to have that happen. I think it's kind of cool. It's like a superpower, but that means that the navigation experience is going to be a little off-putting if someone doesn't like that. So to use your example, Kelly, earlier of the hallway in a bedroom, you could shoot a hallway, walk forward, go through a doorway, around a corner, so there's no line of sight.
Yes.
Shoot the bedroom, align it manually. If it doesn't auto, it might automatically align it. And then just accept the fact that you're going to have a jump through a wall.
Yeah.
But that's not ideal. So what we're kind of recommending is that if you want like best practice, you shoot a scan in the hallway, shoot one with line of sight to that scan to the doorway, and then shoot one with line of sight in the bedroom. So there's a continuous kind of like navigable path, if that makes sense. And that way people don't have to leap through walls, and the auto alignment will hopefully do the job for you. So shooting that extra scan might be easier for you than manually aligning the data if you kind of struggle with that. So that's one reason why it would be good. And it might require less time to shoot that scan than it does to manually align the data. And to be honest, more scans means a more robust tour. So we're kind of always going to sort of recommend that you just kind of shoot the extra scan.
Yes, exactly. And especially as you touched on is the end user's experience. So if they're using the panos to navigate through the home, they will be forced to navigate through walls because that's the next closest panorama, as opposed to if you have more panos, which allows for better line of sight, then it's a more of like a walk-through experience as opposed to shooting through walls and spaces. And if you have customers complain about that, then that's something to consider, is that you probably, you can consider adding more panos to make a smoother walkthrough like experience with the iGuide, for sure.
And remember, you can always deactivate whichever of the panos you do not want to be activated on the virtual tour. So like Chris mentioned, if you're doubting yourself and thinking, should I take an extra pano? Should I not? The answer is always going to be yes. Take that extra one. It's going to make the drafting team happier, and it may even make the client happier as well for being able to move from location to location.
Yeah.
With an add-on for this, there's a little secret thing that some of the operators do that really helps us locate walls that are not high enough, so half walls or railings, to reach the laser data. And the trick behind this is, like Chris said, you can leapfrog through all the bedrooms on the second floor. Make sure you take connecting panos in the hallways on the second floor to connect all the bedrooms together. That's great. If there is a large open to below area that is bounded by a railing, what would really help the drafting team is if you took one additional scan by lowering the camera. So this is at the very end, after you've kept your camera consistent height throughout the whole entire home. You can drop the camera just below the railing, where it will pick up the vertical bars in the railing. And that way you can have that be aligned to the rest of the panos on that floor, and it will give the drafters a very clear indication of the precise location for that railing.
So speaking of stairs, we have a question as well from Bruce. He says, how do you handle split floors, stairs up and down? Is there a standard stairs icon? I have seen it done several ways. And if I have a choice, how do I request a preference?
So this to me is a split level home, where it will go half up and half down. So from the current floor, you go half a flight up to a floor that is kitchen, living, dining, and then you could go half a flight down, which is to a rec room area. So In
And
this case,
specifically with regards to the stair gates, like what do we do with those and how do you
the stair gates.
request?
So,
Yeah.
for example, if we walk into the main floor, it'll have maybe a living room and a little foyer area, maybe an office, and then it splits
Okay.
to go down into the basement or up into the other floor with the kitchen, living, and maybe a family room. What we do is we draw both sets of stairs going up to the floor that is halfway up, and the full set of stairs going down to the floor that is below. We will show both the stairs and we'll show them to their full length. The gates will then be paired to the other floors, which in turn will also show the full length of the stairs. Now, don't worry because the stairs will not be doubled between floors. The floors that have the stairs area attributed to them are always going in the downwards direction. So if the stairs descend from the floor that you are currently on, they will be counted to that floor area. And if they go up to the floor above, they will not be counted because they will count from the higher floor coming downwards. The only exception to this would be the basement or lowest level floor, where we will show the stairs visually going upwards, but they will be counted in this instance because it is the floor area under the stairs that we are counting.
What is the importance of wall thickness and how does it affect totals, if at all?
Okay, that's also a very good question. So attention to this is very crucial. Sometimes we will get a wall thickness that seems a little bit out of the ordinary for us. If we get something, for example, that could be a typo in our mind saying, 68 centimeters for a wall thickness, unless it is something that it was constructed with stone and it's like, I would say medieval sort of looking, then that could be believable. But normally it is a typo. Please note that this will definitely affect the area reported, especially if there's two different types of reporting the area. There's livable area excluding the outside walls of the home, and then there is area including the outside walls of the home. So normally the default thickness that we will draft with, if you don't insert any there, will be 18 centimeters. If you insert 26 centimeters, it will grow the thickness of the wall and it will look like it is 26 centimeters thick. If you by accident put in 13 centimeters, which is almost the same thickness, just a centimeter bigger than the interior walls of a home, it may look a little bit off to yourself and the client when you get the final copy of your iGuide because the walls will look really, really thin. So it plays a role in determining your square footage if you count the outside walls. And it will also play a role in how it will display visually for your floor plan. So to make sure that it looks proper compared to the inside walls of your home and to how it actually should be represented, the thickness will definitely show on the final product.
Awesome. What do the colors mean?
Sorry, if you mean colors of the rooms. So to us, we have in our drafting software a standard set of colors that is unattributed to what you will see on the final iGuide. On the final iGuide, it changes depending on, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, I think you can have just black and white, you can have a tone of blue, then there's a warm color tone, and each one will have a different type of color depending on the room type.
Yeah, well, there's grayscale and then warm, balanced, cool, I believe. And the room, yeah, exactly. So all the bathrooms will be one color, all the bedrooms will be like one color. So it's supposed to give you a sense of what each room is for. But the important thing about shading is that shows you inclusion versus exclusion. So things that are shaded are part of the square footage. Things that are just white are not. So that's critical for understanding what's included in the square footage totals.
When do we draft exterior spaces? And why do we decide to draft or not draft if we decide to go forward and do that?
Okay, so the exterior spaces that we draft have to be attached to the home. Examples of this can be, for example, in a condo, you can have a terrace or a balcony. On a home, you can have a front porch, you can have a back deck, and you can have even a carport that is attached to the home. Carport is like a garage, but without the walls, it's just a cover.
Yes.
So it needs to be attached to the home, has to have a scan,
Okay.
both in the front for the porch and in the back for the deck, in order for those to be both drafted. If you only have one for the back deck and you say, hey, in the front, I just need a porch drafted in at this length by this length, we will never be able to take those dimensions. It does need a scan or a pano of that area. And we need to be able to see how it connects to the home. If there is no way of connecting it to the home, and it's just on a side where you placed it, and we can't definitively say, oh, there's a window that I can see from the inside, it kind of goes here, then we might have a little bit of trouble placing it. It might be drafted a little bit incorrect in its positioning. But if you can guarantee us how it connects to the inside of the home, so say you take a scan of the porch with where the front door is, then you take a scan immediately inside the front door, then we know in relation to where they are and where you've aligned them that that's where the porch is located, and we will outline it for you.
So to summarize a little bit, if you've taken a scan of one of the spaces that we've mentioned, the drafters will draft it in. It doesn't necessarily need to be a custom request. But if you haven't taken a scan of an area, first of all, a great point to note is our drafters are not looking at your galleries. So even if you have a picture of something, we're not paying attention to that. We don't look at anything other than the tar file that you've uploaded. So we're not automatically going to draft anything in that you did not scan. Even if you were to write a note, that we're not going back to check the gallery. So if you've written a note, please draw in balcony, even though you didn't get a scan for whatever reason, that's going to be something that you would have to liaise with the support team to do. We do make exceptions. Again, sometimes we will use the gallery photos when we're dealing with a support ticket because it's a custom request if we feel comfortable placing it, as Marius has mentioned, but we will not automatically draw in porches, carports, balconies, decks, anything, patios of that sort, if there's no scan data. If it's covered in snow, we also may not know how to draft it. So don't assume that it's going to be drafted in just because you have a scan if it's covered in a blanket of snow. Give us a little bit of info. That's happened before. People are like, why didn't you draw this in? It's like, we didn't even know it was there. We can't even see it. So funny. Okay.
That's a very good point. One more thing that we do not draft is like property lines or fence that goes around the property, or if you have a swimming pool in your backyard, those things will not be drafted.
Correct. Yeah. Great point. Okay. Last two my points, and then we can clear up any of the questions if we haven't gotten to them. What is the difference between rejected data and pre-published data? And please explain how that gets categorized and what you do in each instance.
So the difference between rejected and pre-published means we give you the opportunity to say act as Caesar and give a thumbs up to be published or thumbs down to have it not published because you need to give us additional data. Rejected means that either the data was very bad, misaligned, there is no way we can draft it together because it wasn't connected properly. So maybe it was submitted and it is missing connection points. So the right half and the left half can be drafted, but it can't be connected together. And we need to send it back for it to get redone or to collect additional data and then come back to us. Then we put it back together. When you submit it, it'll look clean and complete. Then we can process it. If you have, for example, data that is just pre-published, a really good example of this would be, we know you might want the data right away. You missed a walk-in closet in the master bedroom. We're going to draft everything for you because everything you've submitted is perfect. Spot on. The only thing we can't tell you is for sure how big that corner closet inside the master bedroom is. Or if it's a laundry in there or whatever it would be, we'll just draft the interior walls and we cannot contain the outside without proof of how it connects the walls in there. We will pre-publish that and we can let you know, hey, we've pre-published your iGuide. You have the say in publish it to your client now, collect the data later and have it updated, or hold off on publishing it, go collect additional data, bring it back to us, and we can have it amended and sent out again as a full iGuide.
Awesome. Okay. I think we covered it. So some summary of that last one. Rejected means essentially a drafter has opened a file that's been uploaded and they acknowledge that they can't start drafting. This is like really high level. Pre-published iGuide is there can be drafting done, but it's not a complete floor plan because we didn't get scans of certain areas. So instead of sending you out what was drafted, we pre-publish it, which means we put it in a state where you have a decision whether you want the iGuide to be sent out and report status, all of the measurements sent out to you with the missing space, or you have the ability to just hold it there and say, actually, I don't want anybody to see this. I don't want it to be published until I collect the missing data. And then you have the ability to keep it in that hold section until you make a decision. If you make the decision to move forward with it, it's immediately published. You don't have to wait for anything. And you still do have the ability to go back and add data later. It's just a matter of if you want it to go live right away, or if you want it to stay in that hold state until you capture more data. Whereas the rejected data isn't touched until you align it, get additional data, and most likely both, but definitely the alignment, or I mean, hypothetically, there could be something wrong. Maybe you like knocked your camera, or your camera, your LiDAR got damaged somehow because it fell over and you didn't notice how bad the LiDAR data was, and we can't be confident in what we're drafting because the LiDAR is a mess. That's a super edge case, but that could be something that happens as well and a reason why your data is rejected. But 9.5 times out of 10, it's misaligned data for the rejection. Did I get that right? Awesome. Okay. So we have 2 more questions still in the chat right now. Mark is asking, how are windows drafted? And is it preferable to pull the shades past the edge of the window frame?
That's a very good question. And yes, if you can expose to us the entire window frame, so from edge to edge, we can definitely be much more accurate in predicting the size of a window compared to if we know it's a window because we can see a foot of space in the middle, but the outside is completely covered by blinds. Normally, if the blinds are see-through enough, you can see light as long as you take daylight images or scans. You can see the light protruding through and we can get the best guess that we can. But if they are one of those, I forget what they're called, they're like light out blinds.
Blackout.
Or blackout blinds, there we go. Those ones are really hard to see, so we'll have no idea the size of the window. The closest thing that we could do in a case like that would be if we saw a different window in the room, kind of looks to be the same style, we could take that window size copy and paste it in behind the blinds. But it is always preferable, and this goes back to the original question that we had, is do we need a scan of every space? Yes. And preferably if it is a cluttered closet or room, if you can move some boxes or have the not operator, customer move boxes or move aside clothing or take down the blinds or push them to the sides, it will really, really help for the accuracy of everything that we draft, from walls to windows to doors to anything that could be hidden behind a drape.
So we're at 3 o'clock.
Yeah, it's been an hour. Should we let these poor people go?
We should. I did want to mention, somebody asked in the Q&A, but for everybody else's sake, this session is being recorded. And once it is ready, it will be on our website, goiGuide.com/masterclass. So you will be able to access it there. We're not sending out emails with the recording, but that is where you will be able to find it once it is prettied up and edited and made ready for YouTube and to be shared. So, and make sure you go there to check out our other masterclasses that we have scheduled for the rest of the first half of the year.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for
joining us, Marius, as well. Thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated. And Happy New Year. I know it feels like we're almost halfway through January, but still, Happy New Year. Hope you enjoy the rest of your week. And we'll see you on the next one.
Bye. Everyone.